fundamentally, if we take those lessons from the past, gold has been a source of hedge against inflation and a store of value for millennia. It has stood the test of time. You can't create it. You can't destroy it. There's only an infinite or finite amount, that's ever been placed on this planet, and it's getting harder and harder to find.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Richer Geek Podcast. Today, we're excited to have Alistair Still. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the mining company, which is called GoldMining Inc. He's a mining industry professional with over 25 years experience, including working for major gold miners such as Newmont, Gold Corp, Placer Dome, and Kinross Gold. He's worked within Canada and internationally in a variety of leadership roles, including corporate project development, mine operations, and he spent over 10 years in corporate development, having served as Director, Corporate Development with Newmont Corp, and recently as Executive Vice President, Chief Development Officer for GoldMining. How are you doing, Alistair?
I'm doing great. Thanks very much for the introduction. Happy to be here today.
Yeah, that's a lot of big titles, a lot of great corporations. So a little bit of background. Why mining? It seems like you've been doing it for a long time.
I have been doing it for a long time, and it's one of those professions that really started as a passion when I was a young lad. Actually, I wanted to get into geology. We had a friend that my brother and I chummed around with. His father was a geologist and was frequently off traveling the world. He'd come back with neat rocks to show and great tales to tell. And I thought, hey, that sounds like a pretty cool thing to do. So went to school to train to be a geologist and started working for a mining company. I started at the operational level and worked my way into the corporate level and corporate development, doing M&A, and even a few years down in South America on the project development as project director. So a good broad experience that's developed from really what was originally a love of rocks and then trying to travel and be outdoors and all the fun things that geologists can do.
It's funny that you say the love of rocks, because it's, as I've traveled, and I have a house in northern Arizona where there's just a lot of different rocks, and you always see these people on the side of the roads, or up in the hills, and they're just all looking for rocks. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they call themselves rock hounders here in America. And I'm like, okay, you're hounding rocks. What is that? Well, each region, each place has all these wonderful different types of rocks. So I can see that just going through my property, you see all these different colors and all these different purples and reds and some very interesting rocks. So I can see how fun it would be, because I'm like, oh, wow, what is that? And I take it back to someone that's like, that's called skirt or shirt or something like that. It's nothing, it's like, well, it looked nice, but it was nothing. But there are some other really nice things, a lot of geodes up there and things like that. So I can see how it's cool just to kind of look down and see all these different pretty rocks and wonder what they are.
Well, it's not just the rocks or the minerals themselves. Often it's the fun of the hunt as well. It's like a lot of hobbies where people are amateur collectors. They want to find something better for their collection, better specimen or one from every location where these type of rocks are known from, and it can lead on some pretty fun adventures. Generally, those people looking at the rock cuts at the side of the road, they're not doing it for money, but you extrapolate that to a broader scale. It's kind of what we do as a company, looking for assets that can create value and wealth.
Now, with your company, it's called GoldMining Inc. So what stage of the process do they do? Are they the ones that extract?
It's a great question. At this stage, we're not an operator. What we do have, though, is a very extensive portfolio of assets, which are at the resource stage. We have some 16 million ounces in a category of a formal classification called measured and indicated resources. And we have a further 16 million, these are gold equivalent ounces, in an inferred category. So combined, that's more than 30 million gold equivalent ounces as resources that we publicly report as our company. Those are on 11 different projects, and they're all throughout the Americas. So we like to stay in a nice north-south jurisdiction in areas where we can certainly help minimize our geopolitical risk. So we're stable. We're in Canada. We've got projects in the US. And we have Colombia and Brazil, and one project in Peru as well. So all well-known mining jurisdictions. These are resource stage projects, which really we've accumulated over a number of years, and now we're starting to daylight the value, to do additional studies, further work to advance them to the next stages of more detailed study, eventually to development, eventually to production.
We've had some mining companies on the podcast before, so I'm just trying to get kind of a linear explanation of the different processes. When people think of copper mining, gold mining, uranium mining, they're thinking about these big holes in the ground and they're just grabbing it. So you have, like in Canada where you're at, you have these specific mining jurisdictions.
Right.
And then some people go, there's companies out there that all they do is drill holes, bring it up, and see if there's stuff.
Well, exactly. And it's really a couple of key phases or stages that the life of a mining project will go through. And the first stage really is exploration. And there's different stages of exploration. That's really where you're on the hunt for finding something which you hope to define to make economic. And you have the early stage explorers, those with higher risk, but they maybe have a greater return because they're starting earlier. They're looking for things that are less well known and in areas that may be new for exploration. We call that greenfields exploration. And then you can have brownfields exploration, which may be closer to past producing mines, where you have a better indication of minerals having been there before, and that's more advanced exploration. And that advanced exploration can take place, in new projects or alongside past producing projects. Then after exploration, you're into a phase of development, where you're doing a series of studies. You generally start with a preliminary economic assessment, advancing to pre-feasibility, then feasibility. You go for permitting and consultation, and then through development, and eventually sort of the end product, really after generally many years of hard work, and through each successive stage, you're into the production phase. And really, there's still, after all these years in mining, there's still two primary types of mining. You have underground mining and you have open pit or surface mining. And it can be for specific metals, individual metals, or deposits that can host multiple metals. Our particular company has focused on gold. Over 80% of the commodity exposure we have is through those 32 million gold equivalent ounces, but close to 20% of that exposure does come through copper. And we have copper, which occurs as a byproduct in the resources at a couple of our projects. And that's a significant byproduct these days because the copper price, as you and your listeners will know, has been steadily rising. There's a high demand for it. And as there's been a push for a greener economy, it's not just batteries that are in demand and the cars that go with them, but it's the infrastructure, the power grid, the power lines that are going to be needed to charge these vehicles. So there's been a big demand for copper, which has really kept the price high, which helps us as an additional source of revenue when we evaluate the gold resources that we have.
Now, do you see your company maybe making a shift? I know gold is the standard, but do you see, as the world's leaders and the politicians are pushing for that copper, do you see you guys maybe making a shift, or maybe sometime in the future, or are you going to kind of stick with gold? I've always wanted to ask that question. If you're kind of seeing, well, everybody wants copper right now.
Well, I think I like to stick with what we do know best, and what we do know best is gold. And there are companies who will chase what I would call, the flavor of the month. And this year lithium's hot, or next year it could be some other metal that comes into a new battery, and that's fine. That can create value. But I think our expertise and our strength is what we know best, and that is gold. And fortunate for us is that several types of major gold type systems which host gold deposits also contain copper, and we have a couple of large projects that do contain copper. So I think it's an added benefit to us. We, as a side note to that, of the resources we do have, there's over more than 2.5 billion pounds of copper in that resource. That makes our gold equivalent resource, and there's also some significant component of silver. But because silver prices are so much lower than gold, it has a less significant impact on the total value of the resource. But there's often silver occurring as a byproduct on our assets as well. I would point out one additional metal that we do have, which is kind of unknown for people who don't know our company well, and would be certainly very unusual for a company like ours, is that we do actually have a uranium project. And it's not a core project for us, but it is one that came from an earlier transaction. And it's a very large land package in the Athabasca Basin of Alberta in Canada, which is a very well-known uranium producing region across Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's very well known for producing uranium. In fact, the mines in that region have up to 100 times the global average of uranium mines across the world. So very important source of uranium, and uranium has been done very well in the market in the last couple of years, and the price has been positive. But what we like to point out is that the current uranium prices are still only about 1/3 of their all-time high. So there's still room for uranium to grow. And that project that we have, which is 125,000 hectares, which is a huge land package, very prospective ground, that would make a nice standalone uranium company all by itself. So for me, it's kind of like a free option for our shareholders. That may be something we turn into a new co or spin co. We see other companies exploring in that region with $50 or $100 million market caps, with much smaller land packages, much less prospective ground. And here we have a project sitting in our portfolio waiting to be advanced.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's last night I was actually watching a documentary on atomic energy, and they were talking about uranium. And I didn't know that there's all these different grades of uranium. And they're like, well, you can only use this type and this purity levels if you want to create, atomic energy. But then there's all these different grades that you can use for different things. And it was just something that was fascinating to me, that I thought uranium's uranium,
Yeah, no, and it's an interesting metal because there's been a lot of talk, and your listeners will know about some of the geopolitical instability we see in the world these days, and having assets like that, whether they be in gold or copper or even uranium, having them in jurisdictions like Canada and the US and throughout the Americas, that's a real strength to have these days. It takes away some of that uncertainty that companies who may be operating in further places in the world, which may be in the news for the wrong reasons these days, are having a bit more, a little more stress because of that lately. So it's great to have that stability and knowing where our projects are.
Now, talking about stability with your mining industry, and again, it's GoldMining Inc. When we talk about the different political movements and inflation, how does I always know, like, when the dollar's down, gold goes up. And are you seeing this now? It's a two-part question. As you're seeing, is it true, as inflation goes up, as the dollars decrease, do your mining assets, are they more profitable? And then a second one is something that happened like during COVID-19 era, as far as profits, budgets. How did that specifically gold? How did that fare? So, you have the other thing, which is more political, and the other thing is as a health crisis. How does that affect the mining industry?
Well, I think in general, particularly if you look at sort of the global economy and how inflation is very much real, and like myself or yourself or any of your listeners go to the grocery store or go to the gasoline pumps, I mean, inflation is real. It's significant right now, and we're feeling the pinch on that. And there's pretty solid evidence to show that when inflation is high and we have times of uncertainty in the economy, people want a safety or a surety, something that's performed well in those troubling times. And historically, precious metals and gold in particular has done very well. So I think fundamentally, if we take those lessons from the past, gold has been a source of hedge against inflation and a store of value for millennia. It has stood the test of time. You can't create it. You can't destroy it. There's only an infinite or finite amount, that's ever been placed on this planet, and it's getting harder and harder to find. So that does create value when you find it, and it's a great store of value. So I think in these uncertain times that we're seeing with inflation and interest rates, I think people are turning back to gold, and I think the fundamentals are sound. That's going to keep the price of metal at current levels or even driving higher. I mean, we're seeing prices that we haven't seen in quite some time, which is very positive. But I think there's lots of room to grow there. We've seen prices today. The gold price is over $1,900 per ounce. Most of our economics are run at $1,600 per ounce. So there's already extra margin and profit built in there. And because we have such a large resource base, we have an incredible leverage to the price of gold. So that's solid. A company like ours, the big resource, that's a great foundation to build upon, and I think a strength in these uncertain times. As for the second part of the question related to COVID, it's another situation where the mining companies, like the rest of the world, have had to adapt and to be thriving in these times and to survive. We have to assess every situation a little differently. But I would say in general, the mining industry, particularly those who operate in the first world countries by major operating companies, have actually survived quite well. And I think one of the reasons they have been able to manage through uncertain times is that they have made tremendous steps in the last generation or so of improving health and safety measures and methods that keep the workers safe. They've been able to keep people working and not spread it amongst the workforces. So the last thing we want is someone coming to work and picking up COVID and taking it home to their families. And particularly when some of these mining camps are in remote areas and in sensitive areas where there's indigenous communities who don't have the same access to healthcare. So people have been very diligent and very thorough in their attention to managing through the crisis, and actually have survived quite well. And I think that's a testimony to the operators. But I think what it also shows is that as those major mining companies have worked through those times, they're actually showing that their reserves have been declining. So they haven't been replacing their reserves, even without the COVID. So the COVID on top of that, when there have been shortages of workers, it's magnifying the situation, showing there's a shortage of resources, and that makes companies like ours, which have a large inventory of projects, that much more attractive to major mining companies who may be looking for new projects to put into their pipeline to advance quicker through the development into production. So it's a big cycle we're part of, but I think the mining company has been showing that it's well established and set for it has some historical stereotypes people have about mining, but it's really quite a modern and efficient business these days.
Yeah, well, the stereotype leads into one of the other questions is what kind of pushback, if any, do you get locally or regionally from those that are against mining? Are you seeing that? How are you handling it? It's kind of funny. There's a certain group of people that love green, but oh my God, how do you mine that? Well, you can't have your cake and your ice. You can't have. You need both. You can't have one or the other. And I think that's just one of the big things. Is like, look, if you want a more green economy, green world, you still have to have these minerals and these assets, and you can't have one without the other. Are you seeing any pushback from type of people? Or I think in you're probably creating so many jobs locally that people and in these mining jurisdictions that people love it, but you get any pushback?
Well, I think it's certainly one of the key issues for any either an exploration company, development, or operating company is really the social issues that surround projects. And I think, what we've clearly learned is that the sort of the past approach that, we're creating jobs, so it must be good for the local people, that really just doesn't cut it. I mean, there's so many more angles to investigate, and protecting the environment and the local culture and the indigenous people who have been living there for millennia. So I think it's a much more complicated process these days. There's a lot more diligence put into the efforts to engage with stakeholders, and you have to realize that at the end of the day, you're not going to get everybody on board, but you have to get enough people that you can have support. And it's really the local support that will make a project succeed or fail. The mining company can be the catalyst and introduce the project and introduce it well, but it has to be accepted by the communities, or they simply won't move forward. And what we have seen is that we run into, and not specifically our group, but in general, mining will run into groups where people are anti-mining, and I think that's a tough position to take, because as you point out, there's so many facets that we rely on for our daily lives. From our cell phones to our cars, or the bus, or our television, our homes. It all comes from a product of mining, and even the future of green energy, whether it be batteries or wind turbines. It's all coming from products that are mined. And my view has always been, I would rather see mining done at a responsible level with companies who are engaged in doing it responsibly and with the strictest adherence to engaging with the local stakeholders than, trying just to say no and pushing it to some place where you may not know where it's occurring anymore, and who knows what's happening and what damage is being done. So I think it has to be the right balance, and certainly the right engagement with the local stakeholders to find a balance that works for all parties.
Yeah, very well said. And, for anyone that wants more news on specifically GoldMining Inc., but also the industry, GoldMining Inc. has a website, which is GLDGnews.com. And if I get this right, you can subscribe for free, get alerts. What kind of alerts, what kind of news, what's got some of the information that our listeners can get when they sign up for that?
Yeah, we update regularly with our project status, various, if we engage in exploration programs and in general news flow. We have also a general website, www.goldmining.com. Easy to reference. We're listed on the US NYSE, the ticker symbol GLDG. We're also on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Very easy ticker symbol here, GOLD, gold. So that's an easy one to remember. But our news alerts are very important, and even this week we had important news out at the beginning of the week. We launched a new subsidiary called US GoldMining Inc. And the prime focus of that vehicle will be to advance our Whistler project, which is in Alaska. It's almost 9.5 million gold equivalent ounces, which is copper and gold, in about 100 miles from Anchorage in Alaska. Gold and copper, exciting resource-based project that has not seen any exploration in almost 7 years now. We've developed some new ideas. We have a new team. We have a camp that we can be resurrecting there, and we're pretty excited about going back and starting some work to define that value on a project which has largely been dormant and been underappreciated for a number of years, and can be surfaced with some work we have planned.
Yeah, that's very cool. And GoldMining Inc. is one of the few gold junior companies that actually trade on the New York Stock Exchange, which is very nice.
Yeah. We also have the added advantage. We're one of the few juniors where we have an incredibly strong balance sheet. We spun out a project last year, or a new company called Gold Royalty Corp. Yeah. We have now 20 million shares in that company, and that contributes to a balance sheet which has over $100 million on it. Cash and securities, it's over $100 million. Wow. For a company that's trading at less than $300 million market cap. So strong balance sheet. And actually, those shares in Gold Royalty, we're even generating dividend income this year. We'll be almost $1 million in dividend income receiving on those. So that'll help us with our own project work and starting to explore these properties ourselves. So strong balance sheet with dividend income, with a tremendous resource base of 32 million gold equivalent ounces is really quite a a story that sets us apart from most of our peers.
Yeah, because if I get this right, then that means, like, if you have that many shares of the royalty company, and that's you said almost half your current market cap.
Mm-hmm.
Then that actually brings down the gold resource as the per ounce is lowered.
Exactly. If you look at enterprise value, which is basically our market cap less cash and securities. So an enterprise value per resource ounce is not far off $5 per ounce, which is it's unheard of. Most of our peers would trade at $20, $30, $40, $50 per ounce. So it doesn't take much to see a little leverage there in as we advance our stories in the gold price and moving from $5 to 20, 30, 40, 50 EV per ounce. There's a tremendous upside for our shareholders there.
And ladies and gentlemen, one of these shareholders is BlackRock. I know all of you have heard of them. So if they believe in this company, then I think you should too. Now, here's a question. I think historically when gold rallies, the stock performs much better than the spot price. And that's what us as investors, that means amazing leverage.
Exactly. Yes.
What do you attribute? Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think it just goes back to the fundamentals of having a very large resource base. Small change in the price of gold can be magnified and amplified the margins it will create on the projects and the development of those assets. And we've seen that in the past when gold has rallied. Gold mining has done extremely well. We're seeing that again now. This year to date, we're up over 50% at the time we recorded this and year to date. So we've been performing very well year to date. That's in combination to a little bit in the rally in the metals, but also as we're advancing our projects, we had a new preliminary economic assessment out on one of our projects in Colombia earlier this year. Showed very strong positive economics. The recent announcement of creating gold mining, or U.S. gold mining, that's strong advancement of another one of our core projects, and we're currently advancing a PEA study on our San Jorge project in Brazil as well. So some very positive news combined with a strong gold price has really started to add torque to our price, and as you say, it's great leverage to our investors who have benefited very well this year.
Do you think that's the most exciting catalyst for GoldMining Inc? In your opinion, is it?
Well, I would say that, as catalyst, the metal price is nice, but it's unfortunately something I can't control. What I can control is what we do with our assets and how we advance them. So that's what I get excited about. The gold price moving is a bonus. It's kind of like the starter fuel to this, high performance engine we have just, starting to take shape here. And as we, spark up each cylinder in this engine and add a little, extra with the octane with the price of gold, it's really starting to take off here. And it's, it's an exciting story. And when I came to the project or to the company just over a year ago now, the company had really focused in its first 10 years of existence as being an acquirer. Amir Adnani, our chairman and founder, incredible entrepreneur, had set the company up. He'd made some tremendous acquisitions, effectively for 10 cents on the dollar. He'd been buying assets in downturns in the market when the price of gold was $1,000 per ounce. Things could be bought at more affordable rates. Now you move forward and bring in me and my team I've built around me now, which has an operation and exploring and development background. We can take those assets, start to surface the value, combine that with a high gold price, and it really makes for a very compelling story.
Yeah. Well, Alistair, I appreciate you coming on. And everybody, again, it is GoldMining Inc. Alistair Still, the CEO. It was a pleasure talking to you today, and I hope you have a great evening.
Pleasure being on here. I look forward to speaking again in the future.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye now.